G'day and welcome to Cooper Anchors. Today we're going to talk about the different methods of setting up the rope and chain on your anchor, why it's so important to be using the correct scope, and which anchor to use for your watercraft. The number one piece of advice we find ourselves giving is the importance of using correct scope. Scope is just the ratio between the depth of water and the amount of rope you need to be letting out. All boat anchors, regardless of design, are made to be pulled horizontally as possible, not to hold your boat down. The purpose of the chain and the longer scopes is to help absorb the shock and sudden loading caused by wind, swell and current. It does this by creating what's called a catenary or sag in the rope. And this helps maintain that more horizontal pull, as horizontal as possible. If you don't have enough scope, you'll simply pull your anchor up and out. So to help you understand why scope is so important, I'm going to demonstrate now using these three anchors, using the incorrect scope and then the correct scope. So you'll see here, using a scope that's far too short, the anchor simply never gets the chance to set. It's just getting pulled up and out. Regardless of the type of anchor that you're using, if you're not using the correct scope, it'll never get the chance to set correctly. And again, using the incorrect scope, the anchor never gets the chance to set. But come straight out and use correct scope, and straight away that anchor's set. So first up here we've got our 230 gram or half-pound nylon anchor. This is what we recommend for kayaks, canoes, stand-up paddleboards. It's a nice small light anchor and it fits in most storage compartments of kayaks. Up next we have our 1 kilogram or 2.2 pound. This is what we recommend for jet skis and small boats to 3.5 meters. This is made from a fibre reinforced nylon. Again, it's quite small, so it fits in the storage compartment of your jet ski. Now, when we first started manufacturing these, we used to get the question fairly regularly, is a plastic anchor really going to be strong enough to hold my jet ski? Well, the answer is yes. I could throw a whole lot of numbers at you about braking strains and load capacities, but I think the best option is to show you this. A few years ago, my brother and I took this photo to answer the question, is the anchor strong enough? Now here we've used a pink anchor, but it's exactly the same thing, just it's a pink one. And yes, I'm the one with the dirty dreadlocks. Up next, we have our 1.5 kilogram anchor, or 3.3 pound. This too is made from a glass fibre reinforced nylon. This is what we recommend for boats up to 5.5 meters. Now this one's only 0.5 kilogram heavier than our previous anchor, but it's significantly bigger in its ratio. It has exceptionally good holding power for those bigger boats up to 5 meters. And finally, we have our 3.5 kilogram aluminium anchor. Now this one's made from a very high grade marine aluminium, and this is what we recommend for boats up to 6.5 meters. So now we're going to talk about the different methods to set up the rope and chain on your anchor. Just for the purposes of the demonstration, I'm going to be using our 230 gram anchor. It's just a lot lighter for me to be handling and showing you how to set them up. First up here, we have just all rope. You can simply tie it straight to the anchor, or you can of course splice like this. If you want to learn how to tie a bowline knot or splice, check the links in the description. Using this method, we really only recommend this for the kayaks and even jet skis who are anchoring in relatively calm conditions and shallow water. Using this method, we recommend a scope of 7:1, which means if you're in 2 meters of water, we recommend 14 meters of rope. It's equally at home on this anchor as it is on the 1 kilogram anchor, but again, relatively calm conditions and shallow water. The next method we have here is a combination of rope and chain. Now, what we have here is a little bit of a twist on traditional thinking. Instead of shackling the chain directly to the anchor, we've tied a piece of rope between the chain and the anchor. As a rule of thumb, what we would recommend is that this piece of rope be equal to the length of your boat. So if you have a 3.5 meter boat, you would have 3.5 meters of rope. If you had a 6 meter boat, you would have 6 meters of rope. The piece of chain is roughly a third of that. So if you had a 6 meter boat, we would recommend 2 meters of chain. Now using this method, this is a great option for all anchors, all of the size boats. It greatly reduces the amount of chain that you need to carry. So this is a good option even for the kayakers, but there is a catch with the kayakers. I understand that some kayaks can be 6 or 7 meters long, and you certainly don't need 6 or 7 meters of rope and then 2 meters of chain. You can adjust this yourself. You can go out and experiment and see what works for you, but you can use shorter lengths of rope and shorter chain. But we still recommend using this method across all the anchors, a scope of 4:1. So if you're in 2 meters of water, we recommend 8 meters of rope and chain. Of course, if you are using one of the methods that attaches the rope directly to the anchor, if you're anchoring somewhere in artificial reef, of course, you will need to use a shackle. Rather than untie it and retie it back up to this end, use your shackle, put it through the hole at the base of the shank, and tie your cable tie through this side. Now, we don't recommend always leaving your anchor like this. That seems to be putting a lot of faith into a cable tie. It might let go at a time that you don't necessarily want it to. It's a great idea to get it back out of an artificial reef, but it's not a good idea to leave it like that all the time. Okay, so the final option we have set up here is a long piece of chain. Using this method, what we recommend is that chain should be equal to the length of your boat. So if you've got a 3 meter boat, we recommend 3 meters of chain. If you've got a 6 meter boat, 6 meters of chain. Using this method, we recommend a scope of 3:1. So if you're in 2 meters of water, we recommend putting out 6 meters of rope and chain. Now, this method is at home on all of the anchors. For the kayakers and the jet skiers, you can get away with using a nice thin stainless steel chain. That way it's a little bit easier to handle, and it looks a little bit prettier in your jet ski. For the bigger boats, obviously bigger chain. You can look in the link right here or in the link in the description at our anchoring guide, and it will tell you the size of the rope and chain that you should be using for your watercraft and your anchor. So something I wanted to talk to you about was the importance of estimating the depth of water. Now, of course, you can always use a depth sounder, which is what we of course do on our boat. But something you need to keep in mind, especially when anchoring in shallow water, is the height of your anchoring point from the water. I know that on our boat, our anchoring point is exactly 1 meter from the height of the water. So if we're anchoring in 2 meters of water, we need to account for that extra meter. So when we're putting out scope, the difference is significant when you're in shallow water. When we're putting out, say, if we're anchoring in 1 meter of water, and we know that our ratio needs to be 4:1, so we're going to put out 4 meters of rope. However, we're not accounting for that extra meter from the water to our anchoring point. So what we should be accounting for is 2 meters, and we should be putting out 8 meters. Now, this is really only important in shallow water. When you get out into deeper water, let's say you're in 10 meters of water, if you're not accounting for that extra meter, it's not so bad. If you're using a 4:1 ratio, if you're using the combination of rope and chain, and you know that your scope needs to be 4:1, and you're in 10 meters of water, then you know that you need to be putting out 40 meters of rope and chain. So in that circumstance, accounting for that extra 1 meter only means putting out an extra 4 meters of rope and chain. So it's not quite so significant, but in shallow water, you're doubling your scope. Or, if you look at it the other way, you're halving your scope. So if you're not thinking about that anchoring point, not so important in kayaks and jet skis because you're basically right on the water, but for the bigger boats like ours, we have a 6.5 meter boat, and as I said, it's 1 meter above the water, so we know that when we're working out our scope ratio, we need to account for that extra 1 meter. Thanks for watching. I hope we taught you something and I hope it was educational. Keep in mind that the scope recommendations that we've given aren't our ideas, they've been around for 100 years, and it's regardless of what type of anchor you're using. And when the wind, swell and currents increase, you should also increase your scope. And when in doubt, let more out. If you'd like more information about your specific anchor and how to anchor, check the links in the description. And as I said earlier, if you'd like to learn how to tie a bowline knot or splice, check the links in the description. Thanks for watching.
Cooper Anchors, for whatever boat you float.